Hello, everyone. My name is Madu Galappaththi. I am a PhD candidate at the University of Waterloo, Canada. My presentation today is based on a very recent publication in Maritime Studies Journal. I will be presenting a new conceptual framework that will help us better understand gender relations within dried fish value chains. Now, this new framework is very relevant across agricultural and food systems, which are largely informal sectors. And this is because the insights that we get from applying the framework can help us answer critical questions like, for example, will both women and men be impacted from any intervention in the same way? Or will all women be impacted the same way? So my mentors and co-authors on this paper are Professors Derek Armitage, Pradeep Nayak, and Andrea Collins from the University of Waterloo. I will start with a brief introduction about how deeply gendered the dried fish value chains are. And I will talk a bit about the existing approaches to study gender in value chains broadly. And then I will introduce the two concepts that I weave together to develop the new framework. And we'll end with a brief case study to show the application of the framework. So dried fish is a subsector within small-scale fisheries, and it is particularly popular in Asia and Africa. And as we know, value chains are organized as a series of activities. And dried fish typically employs traditional low-cost, low-tech methods like sun-drying, salting, and smoking. Now, I'd like to bring your attention to the gaps in our knowledge when it comes to dried fish research and policy. Dried fish as a sector has received very little attention in literature, and it has rarely received any policy attention. When it comes to gender relations, we have only a handful of published studies. So there's a significant research gap. And women predominantly occupy the fish drying node of the value chain. However, they sometimes also involve in other nodes in an overlapping way. For example, they dry fish and then also sell that fish in nearby places. So they work in both the drying node and the trading node. And fish drying can be a way of life for many people. It provides a nutritious source of food that can be stored in room temperature, so huge social relevance to developing contexts. It supports social networking, and gifting of dried fish can be a part of traditional cultural practices. So for the women in particular, their participation in value chains support themselves, their families, as well as their communities. However, these women face significant constraints in fully participating in the value chain and benefiting from their work compared to men. And this is how gender inequities are created. Now, this diagram shows the key constraints women face. We have developed this diagram based on the limited dried fish literature, and we have also drawn insights from small-scale fisheries literature. Now, these constraints may look similar to that of most informal sectors of the economy. However, I'd like to highlight two key aspects in relation to gender inequity in dried fish. First, fisheries have been historically perceived as a masculine domain. Therefore, the power hierarchies, the gendered practices that these value chains embody have a long history. And second, these constraints are directly shaped by social structures. For example, caste, ethnicity, culture, that these value chains are embedded in. And particularly women from socially marginalized groups, like lower caste groups and widows, bear the brunt of these inequities. Now, understanding these aspects are critical because they reveal the root causes of inequity embodied in these value chains. For example, improved mobility for women to travel to distant markets that they aren't able to go now may bring empowering experiences for them. And experiences like this are also important because they may also signal shifting gendered norms and expectations that patriarchal societies tend to impose on women. So having looked at these issues, let's see what the gender study within value chain literature broadly offer us to understand what's happening in dried fish. Now, as we know, the adoption of gender perspective is not new in value chain studies. Lots of researchers and practitioners from various disciplines and from various development organizations have engaged with this area. And they have used various applied frameworks under different themes like gender mainstreaming and inclusive development to understand value chains. Overall, we have some strengths in this body of literature, but also some limitations. Now, I have listed here some key ideas that are particularly relevant to studying dried fish. First, there has been wide attention to topics like economic empowerment, access to resources, agency and power, related to access to markets and technology, and social upgrading, focusing on workers' rights and working conditions, for example, have been a theme. And also the close linkage between productive and reproductive domains related to how women make time to do value chain work. And also households as the site of work and different forms of labor, for example, family labor, part-time labor, through which women embed value in these value chains. And more recently, and especially within fisheries, the need to broaden the concept of value has gained attention. For example, the need to include aspects like social connections and sharing that may have equal or more value than just the economic value or the financial value. So coming back to dried fish, if we are to better understand women's experiences, we will need a more contextualized understanding of how people benefit through their work in these overlapping value chain nodes. In other words, we need new conceptualizations. In developing the new framework, our point of departure from existing literature is the notion of relationality. And that is the creation of experiences in relation to one another within a given context. And relationality helps bring special attention to two aspects. The first, socially and culturally distinct ways that people benefit from value chains, like how the value chains support local traditions that are important to women. And second, it shows how those benefits are mediated by social relations. This is precisely why I link the concepts of social well-being and intersectionality in developing the new framework. Social well-being is a concept that brings attention to the range of benefits It focuses on three key dimensions: material, benefits like income and food, and relational benefits like kinship, ties, and social networks, and subjective benefits like values, future hopes, and aspirations. So taken all together, all these three dimensions is the social well-being, which is beyond just the material values. And the key element of focus in linking social well-being to value chains is the meanings and social connections that lie beyond material benefits. And the second concept, the concept of intersectionality, on the other hand, is about how systems of power and oppression overlap to shape people's lived experiences. And by definition, it brings attention to marginalized groups. And within dried fish value chains, this concept is used to understand how women and men are uniquely positioned in value chains in relation to the benefits that they can get from them. Intersectionality, therefore, can add further analytical value to our research in value chains. Now, this is the new framework that we advance. These concepts have not been previously linked in this way. We start with the relational structures within a given society. So this array of structures may vary by the context we are looking at. For example, if religious identity is not prominent within a given society, then religion can come out of the framework. Likewise, this array can be modified to include additional structures like marital status, age, political affiliations that may create oppression within a given context. And this is the area of intersection and the value chain, with attention to the overlapping nodes and the broad notion of value and the gendered social well-being with its three dimensions. Here, there's a two-way linkage between the value chain and social well-being, because improved social well-being leads to better value chain outcomes. For example, when social ties facilitate trust and information sharing, women might be able to access good quality fish and also more profitable markets. Now, finally, I'd like to apply this new framework to an empirical case that we have drawn from literature. So briefly, the case details first. It is about Naziratek, which is Bangladesh's second largest fish drying yard. The seasonal workforce in this yard is made out of local inhabitants, seasonal migratory workers, and migratory workers from elsewhere in Bangladesh, and Rohingya refugees. They are a religious minority group from Myanmar. Now, all these workers are extremely poor. About half of the total female workforce is Rohingya, and about 1/3 of these Rohingya women are widowed, abandoned, or divorced. And these women often experience denial of work by supervisors compared to Bengali women who are in there. These supervisors are men belonging to local groups. And Rohingya women are also at increased risk for sexual exploitation at work because lack of protection from husbands or male family members. Now, if we quickly apply the new framework to unpack the experience we see here, we see that labor is deeply gendered and women perform lower paid tasks in the value chain and are in subordinate positions because men hold the supervisory roles. And from a three-dimensional well-being perspective, fish drying seems to provide an opportunity for work for women, and therefore they can earn a source of income. And In addition, working alongside a large number of women from the same group may bring a sense of comfort or mutual support for the women. And there's also hopes and aspirations around their ability to support the day-to-day survival of themselves and their families, because these are extremely poor groups. The structures of oppression operating within the value chain include racism between Rohingya and people with Bengali ethnic origins. There's also localism between local inhabitant groups and all other migratory workers, and the marital status. Overall, when gender intersects with these other structures, it seems here that Rohingya women are the most marginalized in this particular value chain. So those are the kinds of insights that the new framework can provide. And we use the term a thick description of gender relations that is emerging from the application of the framework. So such a description is very important, because these insights not only help address a research gap, but also they are applied insights that can directly inform policy and practice interventions to promote equitable benefits for everyone involved in the value chains. So that brings us to the end of my presentation. I would like to acknowledge the partners of my research. Thank you very much for your attention.